Welcome to Off Panel.
Yo everybody, welcome to Off Panel. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the writer of comics like Heartthrob, Welcome Back, and the currently being Kickstarted series, Short Order Crooks. It's Christopher Sebela. Thanks for coming on, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
So you're basically in the middle, you're not basically, you're in the middle of your Kickstarter campaign for Short Order Crooks right now, and you're over halfway there. Did you get 10,000 today?
Not yet. We're like right on the verge.
Okay, so I'm curious, at this point, what's your day-to-day life like promoting this and everything? Is every waking moment spent thinking about how to promote this project at this point?
Sort of, but it's also like I don't want to be that dude who's just like, oh, every time I see a tweet from this guy, it's talking about his Kickstarter. So I'm trying to, and this is like my struggle with social media is like, how do I promote without being obnoxious about it? Like, how do I turn self-promotion into a joke almost? And yeah, it's hard. You run out of jokes with like just Kickstarter to deal with. So yeah, I've been thinking, and like I've been reading some articles about like, here's what you do during your Kickstarter, like the arid drought season of your Kickstarter. So yeah, I've just been like thinking of stuff, but I have other stuff I need to be doing. So I'm kind of just, yeah, I know that traditionally this is just when things dry up. So I'm not going to freak out too much.
Mm-hmm. I imagine it's probably really heavy in the beginning and really heavy at the end.
That's what I hear.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you did. I lived in a clown motel. I mean, like that.
Yeah.
That was a different beast, though, right?
Yeah, that one. Like, I mean, I was actively telling people not to give me money, and I was actively hoping that I wouldn't make it. So yeah, like doing one for serious is just so much harder because it's like I so overthought it, and when I put the clown motel one together, like, it was so slapdash, and I was just like, yeah, okay, that sounds fun. And this, I'm just thinking about, okay, return on investment, like, and how much to get George paid and how much to get Leslie paid, and it's like an actual business this time, which is hard for me.
I do think it's really interesting how it's almost like Clown Motel succeeded just because it was such an odd thing. And it was an easy sell for that reason. But now that you're on to like this thing that's a passion project that you've been developing and everything, and you have actual creative team behind it and everything like that, it can be tougher. But I totally I'm not on the same level as you. I'm not trying to generate $16,000, but I did start a Patreon recently, and it is weird. Like for me, I find like the desire to fine tune it and everything like that to be this oddly all-encompassing thought in my head. But there's also that fine line. You don't want to go too far where you annoy people and drive them away from what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm still, I started a Patreon, and I've just been diving headlong into all these things that I've been seeing other people do and I've been curious about. So that's, yeah, it's really hard to figure out, like, where am I doing like just the right amount, and like, where am I like blowing it and overextending myself, or am I giving too much away for free? Is like, I had somebody come to me about my Kickstarter and they were like, dude, you should be charging more for all this stuff. And I'm just like, yeah, maybe, but I don't want to do that. I just want enough to pay the art team and to get a book made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, okay. So now to dial it all the way back, for listeners out there, what's Short Order Crooks all about?
It's a crime/cooking comic. It's set in Portland, and it's in the specifically in the Portland food truck scene. Mm-hmm. So our main character is Rockwell Granger, and he's like on the wrong side of 40, and he's finally living his dream of like owning a food truck, but he's really bad at it. Like he's good at cooking, but the whole like dealing with the public part, he's just no good. Anyhow, he borrowed a lot of money to get his food truck, and the loan sharks he owes the money to want him to track down this rogue pirate food truck that is invading their territory. So yeah, then he gets teamed up with a sort of freegan girl named Harper, and hijinks ensue. I keep describing it as the Rockford Files meets Repo Man with food trucks.
I like it. That's great. I also like that you use the term freegan, which I didn't actually realize was a friend of mine in college he knew somebody that was freegan, and that was something that I'd never been aware of before then. It's a funny term. I think it's pretty hilarious, but
yeah,
I do think it's funny that when I actually Googled this, I got a lot of results for an episode of Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers.
Yeah, I found that out.
I didn't realize that. I was trying to find interviews, and I was like, is this like a homage to Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers?
No, that's just the weird, confluence.
I did want to actually ask, I don't want to get too deep in the plot because, you've covered that. There's all kinds that, you can read all about it on the Kickstarter, but I wanted to actually ask about Rockwell, the main character.
Mm-hmm.
Was his story autobiographical at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely, I feel like there's a autobiographical element to any of like my creator-owned stuff. For that, yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I don't know. I feel like I tend to write books about people who have like sort of missed their ship or have a lot of regret. And I don't know that I necessarily have a ton of regret, but I definitely have some, and I'm definitely haunted by things, and I just feel like it's more interesting to explore characters who are really kind of wrestling with something bigger than just the plot, like that, like even if the plot never happened, they'd still be like sort of just as under siege, but it'd be just inside their dark bedroom rather than running around on the streets or something.
Yeah, I mean, stories of all varieties would be pretty hard to tell if everything just went right all the time. I mean, Entourage even had bad things happen, and that was like that was basically like a party for 7 seasons or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, when I was reading it, I was like, this actually, I kind of feel like Rock's story could be like your story for this Kickstarter, because it's like, oh, I'm trying to do this thing, but I'm trying to get people to pay for it too. It's like, why don't they understand that Mingo can go in tacos? And you're like, why don't they understand that, this is not saying that you're not successful or something like that, but
sure.
I was just finding those parallels as I was reading it, and I wanted to ask about that. But, I noticed in the first issue that Kelly Sue DeConnick gets a credit for Created By.
Yeah.
What is the origin story of this comic? I mean, so you and Kelly concocted it originally? Is that what the deal is?
Yeah. So this was back in like 2011. And I remember it might have even been 2010, but I remember I was over at their house, and Kelly Sue, I was downstairs outside her office, and she had mentioned that she was trying to come up with a cooking comic. And immediately I was like, well, like food trucks, like, and I was like, and then you just call it Rockford Taco Truck. Like you do food carts and detectives and Rockford Taco Truck. And then we started talking about it more and decided to work on it together, and kind of came up with the, our 2 main characters and the sort of mystery that pulls them through this first arc. And we got it to a pretty good shape and pitched it, and the publisher was like, oh, we're actually already doing a comic about food carts, which I was like, damn, like I can't believe but they are a Portland publisher, so it makes sense. So yeah, then it just like kind of sat for a bit, and then Kelly Sue blew up and got super busy. But I was always I was hooked on the story at that point. And, So Kelly Sue gave me her blessing. She's like, just run with it. Like, just, do what you want with it. So yeah, then George and Leslie and I put the pitch together. This was back, in 2015, and sent that around and didn't get much of a response. So yeah, then when we formed Two Headed Press, I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to put Two Headed Press together was because I wanted to do Short Order Crooks. So yeah, that's where we are now.
Well, I actually hadn't planned on going here yet, but I wanted to ask about Two Headed Press because I think it's a really cool endeavor. We'd planned on talking about it, but your Power Numbers imprint of sorts you put together with Ed, that's basically what it is. It's like you, Ed Brisson, Teenie Howard, Fabian Rangel Jr. I don't remember who else is in it.
Ryan Ferrier and Kurt Pierce.
Yes. Anyways, so you have that whole crew together. Was that basically, did you put that basically together to effectively kind of have more buying power, so to speak? Like have more oomph behind your guys' own, crowdsourcing endeavors and everything like that? Or like, what was the reasoning behind putting that together?
I think initially it was just that we were all, outside of Fabian, we were all kind of freaked out about it. Fabian's like an old pro at kickstarting books now.
So when you say it, you mean crowdsourcing, like kickstarting?
Yeah. And I remember that Ed and I had been talking a while about like possibly teaming up under some sort of, heading. And then it started on Twitter, and then we took it to email and decided, we'll just form this sort of imprint, and all the books that we kickstart will be under this heading, under this imprint name. And we'll just kind of build a library. And that way, when one of us does another book and somebody wants to check it out, they can go to the site and see like, oh, they've done these 7 books. And it's like we're cultivating our own sort of small interior library. But at the same time, our plan is to, we want to crowdfund it enough basically to pay the artists. And then our plan is to turn around and try and shop the completed project to a publisher as like a graphic novel.
Sure.
So like Fabian already did that with his. He already turned his around to Dynamite, and they're going to be putting out single issues and a trade. So
yeah, I actually think it's a really smart idea, especially given the fact that, I don't know, I've seen a lot of conversation lately about how for newer creators, and that's not exactly where you're at, but at the same time, like you need like a collective knowledge base. You need to lean on other creators so you can figure out what you don't know. And kickstarting, I mean, to me, I find that stuff to be terrifying. Like I said, started a Patreon, and the buildup for me to get to that was, I think I started in November and I launched it in like April. And it's because you do a lot of work to build up to that stuff. How long was that process for getting Short Order Crooks' Kickstarter together? Was like, have you been working on it for a while now?
Yeah, sort of. It's been in the idea stages for a long while, and then initially I was going to launch in January, and then we elected Donald Trump, and it was like nobody wants to spend money on anything. Like, we're going to push this back. So we kept pushing it back, and also I was just like, I don't know. I have a real procrastination problem, so since it was so nebulous, I just kept sort of pushing it back, but not setting a date on it. And finally, I just hit a point where I was like, okay, like, have to do this. Like, I'm terrified of doing it, but we have to do it. So I went on Twitter and said like, hey, we're doing this May 1st. And then I was like, oh crap. Okay. Now I'm locked in. Now I have to actually do it. And then I started slowly putting the Kickstarter page together, but I didn't do a lot of the heavy lifting until the Sunday night. It went live Monday morning, and like all of Sunday, like 11 p.m. Sunday evening, I hadn't made the Kickstarter video yet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And like there were still tons of reward levels. I still had to like finish writing the story of the it was terrible. Like, and I made so many mistakes. Like now in retrospect, like there are pledge levels that it is just like, oh, you did this because like you hadn't had any sleep and you were trying to slap stuff together at the last minute. It's just a nightmare. But that's kind of my brand, I guess, is sort of just throwing myself into stuff. And I'm really just sort of big into experimenting. So like this Kickstarter really is, I mean, like, and I'm convinced we're going to hit our goal, but you know, at the same time, it's also an experiment, and I'm going to see like, okay, here's what works. Here's what sells. Like, here's what I could do better next time. And just honing the process to where, yeah, it's not this terrifying thing.
Yeah, and that's one of the nice things about doing the two-headed press thing is like, let's say I don't know, Teeny does the next one or something like that, and she can lean on what you've learned and what Fabian's learned and everything like that, and you guys can keep kind of refining the formula, and you can figure out what people connect with on rewards and everything like that. I mean, is that kind of part of the plan in general?
Yeah, it's like we basically have each other to talk to, and to go to and say like, hey, I don't know how this works. And it's not just about like kickstarting stuff. It's also about like just other, I mean, to come up with the title of Short Order Crooks, I was so stuck, and I sent it to everyone else in the group, and I was like, here's what I got. Here's the first 6 pages. Any thoughts? And I think like Ed Brisson suggested something with the word short order in it. And then I was like, wait, Short Order Crook. And then I like, yeah. And that was like 3 months of me trying to find a title. But like having this crew that I could just send it to, and like having like, it was just that easy. So it's just nice having, I don't know. I mean, comics is so small as it is, like you kind of feel like you're in it together with most everyone, but having those groups within the group, that's like, oh, okay, this is like our little oasis where, you know, we can sort of speak freely and really like scream about stuff if we want to. It's nice.
Yeah, I mean, either that or you can just post it all on Twitter and you can have everybody extremely mad at you.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to prevent most of the time. So
yeah, I feel like there's like this subculture of Twitter DMing that like nobody's really aware of, where everybody's talking, but they're not necessarily tweeting, and it's probably good because otherwise people would be saying a lot of bad things all the time, or maybe good things. I don't know. Maybe people are having really good DM conversations or something.
Oh, come on. Like it's still the internet. Like it's gonna be like 80% bad.
Oh, that is so sad but true. So I want to talk about your other crew. You're working artist on the book. I'm gonna butcher his name. George Cambadais.
George Combatize.
Ah, okay. And then Leslie Atlansky and Dylan Todd and Jim Gibbons. Dylan Todd's doing design, Jim Gibbons is doing editing, and Leslie is doing colors. It's a great team. Like all those, they're all fantastic, creators in their own right. How did that team come together for the book? Like what made George and Leslie like the first 2 pieces of the puzzle for you?
I'd been wanting to work with George for a long time, and he'd been wanting to work with me. And I don't know, there was an aborted attempt at doing Short Order Crooks with another artist, and it was done in a much more sort of serious, straight ahead fashion. Mm-hmm. Not that it was serious. It was just like art wise, like it looked like a much more serious book. And then I thought about George, and like just looking at his stuff, I was like, man, like George could draw the exact same script, and just because of like his innate Georgeness, like he will make it like I don't know, he has this touch that kind of imbues everything with like it's not cartoonish, but it's just like everything's like kind of lively. Yes. And I love it. Like I just love everything that he draws. Like, and you know, he does his research like to a T. I put a bar in the first issue that's now closed, but it was my favorite bar in Portland, and like George apparently like went and found like copious research photos of it online, because he nailed it perfectly. So yeah, like he's great, and he's super enthusiastic about comics.
Mm-hmm.
And it's nice having, like, just like, and I would always have to write him and apologize and be like, listen, I'm sorry we haven't launched the Kickstarter yet, and here's why. And he's like, hey, no problem, like, just let me know when it's happening and I'm ready to go. And it's just like, oh, George, you're so nice. Yeah, it's just so weird. Like, he's just so chipper. And I think that's why his art looks the way it does, is because he just seems like a naturally just really enthusiastic and upbeat person.
Well, that actually makes me want to ask a question as to what George looks like, because I always feel like there's like this weird trend. Somebody mentioned it recently, and I was like, I 100% agree with this. I always find that artists have a tendency of like either looking like or having the personality of their art, which is like this weird thing. I don't know why that is. But one thing I will say, I was going to use the exact same word for George. His art is very lively. The thing is, for Short Order Crooks, I feel like that book wouldn't work nearly as well as it does if it was kind of that kind of cliche, not in a bad way, but cliche crime art vibe that all like the comics that are crime books have. There's always
Sure.
kind of like a more inky, dark, scratchy kind of look to it and everything like that. And I feel like the way that George's art makes it feel more alive and charming, because it's not supposed. I don't think it's supposed to be a really hardcore crime book, is it?
No, no, not at all.
Yeah, I think his art really fits it, and it makes the whole thing feel a lot more alive because of it.
Yeah, and yeah, it's not a. I mean, this is probably my most upbeat book that I've ever done. Like, spoiler, nobody dies in it. And like, I don't think a single gun appears. So, which are like, if it's a create your own book by me, like, at least one of those things probably happens. But yeah, it's just like, it's I think having George on is really just like, we'll be dealing with, like, some tough type subjects, mostly like, feelings of failure and unreached potential. But like, if George is drawing it, like, it could still have an impact, but it's still fun to look at. Yeah, I'm really excited to see what the rest of the book is going to look like.
So what about Leslie, Dylan, and Jim? Like, how did they come on board?
Leslie is local to Portland, and I've known her for a while. She did color assists for us on High Crimes, when we got really deep into it, and Ibrahim was coloring the book himself, so we needed, like, something had to give. So we brought Leslie on, and she was really great. And I've been wanting to. She colored. I did a sixth issue of this book, Screamland, which was like my first book ever. We just had a sixth issue laying around, but it never got colored, so I hired her to color that. But I've, like, been trying to work on an actual book with her, and yeah, finally made it happen. Dylan is a friend of mine, and he just does great design work. As somebody, like, I used to work as a graphic designer, and like, on my best day, I was never as good as Dylan is on his worst. So he's designed a couple logos for me, and he designed the logo for Heartthrob, and he does all the design work in that, which is and the trade, he did all the work in that. So yeah, Dylan's amazing.
Didn't he create like a GIF of all the logos he's created in the last?
Yeah.
I think that's awesome. Like, it's a really good way of showing off like what you do. And I remember seeing that, and that's one of the things about designers is their work. I'm not going to say it's invisible, but I don't really feel like people recognize like all these, like somebody like Tom Mueller or like Dylan, like they're doing so much stuff that we don't even think about. And so when I was watching that GIF, I was like, really? That was him? And that was him? It was crazy.
Yeah, he's so good. And fortunately, like, he's, I don't know. I mean, fortunately for me, at least, he's still kind of a secret, so I can still afford him. Because he's gonna, like, blow up huge, and then, like, I'll have to call in favors. And Jim was our editor on High Crimes when we were bringing it over to Dark Horse, and I did a story with him for Dark Horse Presents, and he's local. And yeah, Jim has, like, basically he is sort of exited out of professionally editing as his day job, but he's taking on projects on the side. So I figured, one, I trusted him, and two, as a Portland local, like it would be good to have another set of Portland eyes on it.
Yeah, I mean, even though the internet exists, it is nice to have somebody to like talk about in person and everything like that, and look over the materials there. One thing I thought was interesting about the credits for it is you listed yourself or you were listed last. Why'd you decide to go that route?
I don't know. Like that's just like how I've kind of been. I started doing it on my website actually. Like I would like list. For every issue that came out, I would list, the whole creative team and then myself. And for that, it was just like, well, you're on ChristopherSebela.com. Like, if you can't figure out that I wrote this, then maybe there's a different website for you. But I don't know. For something like this, it's just, I don't know. It just didn't really seem to matter to me. And like, as much work as George and Leslie have put in just on pure faith that we would reach this money, for me to write a script is, a smidgen of time compared to what they're putting in for no money. So I figured if nothing else, like, this book wouldn't exist if they didn't do that. So like they deserve all the credits up front. Mm-hmm. And, I certainly like put myself front and center way too much on social media. So, I don't know, like, and I think I also just like kind of the art cred thing that keeps flaring up over and over. It just seems like an easy way to like, just do away with that. Ibrahim and I used to switch credits on the covers of High Crimes, like every month. Mm-hmm. I'd be first, and then the next month he'd be first. So stuff like that, just, I don't know, playing with new ways to present the same old information.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a nice touch. It's like there's nothing bad that can come from it. And it shows that you're kind of conscientious of that stuff because, I'm not saying anything wrong with art cred or anything like that, because I think it's a worthwhile endeavor. But, sure. As as a denizen of the internet, there's a tendency of like seemingly like innocent things being blown out of proportion. So it's always good to kind of get ahead of things like that. And I like the alternating idea. I think Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples do that on Saga too. And mm-hmm. I thought that was a nice, simple solution for it. It gives everybody their day, I guess.
Yeah. And I think I credited myself first on the cover, so it's not like I'm totally selfless.
Oh, you monster. You monster.
Yeah. But yeah, I just like, and I totally believe in art cred, and like, I feel like, none of my books would exist like unless I had so many artists who agreed to work with me on faith, that, it's the least I can do is like, put myself last in terms of, but I feel like I put in the time. Like I also don't want it to seem like, oh, I'm just doing this because I just like, especially for like Short Order Crooks, like, I'm running the whole campaign. I'm going to be shipping everything out. Like I'm basically taking on a part-time job. And, any other creator on book is, you're doing a lot of promotion and blah, 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 which is not as much, but, I just like it flares up at least like every 45 days is like the argument of writers versus artists. And it's like, why are we arguing about this? Like clearly we both need each other and we mostly like each other. It's just like, every 45 days somebody gets angry about something, and then all those feelings right under the surface just kind of leap out.
I find it really fascinating because like the art cred like discussion itself is fairly innocent and seems pretty straightforward. It's just like, just credit the artists, like make sure they're credited. And somehow it always devolves into artists versus writers. And it makes no sense to me because they're kind of secondary things. Like I'm buddies with Declan Shalvey, the guy who's Mr. Art Cred.
Right.
And he in no way thinks that like writers and artists are like mortal enemies or something like that. But somehow it always turns into that. And I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean it's the internet. You know, it's the game of telephone, except on a much faster scale.
This is
So
true. So I want to actually ask a couple more questions about the Kickstarter. I find the whole process fascinating, but the rewards always seem odd because it's like they kind of seem like it seems like a lot of people will support you no matter what because they're like friends or whatever and they want to do that. But for a lot of people, the rewards are super important. Was that one of the big like? Be honest, what was more difficult, writing the first issue or coming up with the rewards for the Kickstarter?
probably the rewards, because I'm still writing them. Like I'm still like devising the rewards, and yeah, it's so much. Uh, I think I went overboard and I offered like too much like I offered basically any variation on a theme you could think of. And it's like, no, this is in retrospect, I would scale it way back. But yeah, it's just like, I don't know. I'm trying to keep my main concern was keeping costs low. So I didn't want to promise anything that was too crazy and that we couldn't really like pull off from our houses. So like, yeah, everything that we offer is fairly small and can be mostly shipped flat. And yeah, I don't know. I'm still coming up with stuff like Kelly Williams, who's a comics artist who I love and know. He offered to draw watercolors of your favorite food. So like, I'm slowly adding in stuff like that.
I saw that
like,
one, and that was very tempting to me. Very
yeah.
tempting.
But yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know what people want. And that's part of the experiment of this campaign is like when the Kickstarter gives you all these diagnostics in the app. It'll show you like which pledge level got the most and just all these stats. So I have to sit down when the campaign is over and like go through them and like I suck at math so much. Like the worst part of this campaign was like trying to do math to figure out shipping.
Right.
It's so terrible. But like now I have to learn like statistics and like percentages. It's so awful. But this is like, I want to be a businessman, so I guess I have to learn math and responsibility.
Yeah, there's all these wrinkles you don't really think about. Like when I was putting mine together, I have this one where it's like doing loot crates for people, or like mini loot crates, where I send them like a trade paperback every month, or if it's the bigger one, I send them a bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I didn't think of was international shipping from Alaska.
Right.
If I'm shipping this large box of comics to Ireland from Alaska,
You're so boned.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be in the hole. I'm gonna be losing
Yeah.
money on each of those. And I didn't even thankfully somebody tweeted me that, and they're like, "Hey, does that count for international?" And I went onto like the Postal Service website, put in like what I thought it might be, and I was like, "Oh my god,
Yeah.
so expensive."
Yeah. I went and bought, there's a program called Indicia, which is like the more official stamps.com. And yeah, I just sat in my living room one night and ran everything like international, like, and figured out like, so I can't ship like any of the heavier trades because that'll just like, I mean, I'll put the shipping on there, but nobody's going to pick it. Like,
Right.
and it's the same with like retailer options. I talked with Bruno at the Big Bang, and
Right.
he was like, "We'd love to do it, but the shipping would just like we'd have to charge like $8 an issue." And I was like, "No, I totally get it, but I'm just putting that offer out there for anybody crazy enough and worse at math than I am to take me up on it."
Yeah, I actually saw that exchange and I was going to ask about it. But I mean, like that's the type of thing like you can't, if you're going to fund the project, but you also want to get this out there, it's like you kind of have to do that, even if somebody like Bruno wouldn't be able to order it because of that. And I don't know, it's kind of tricky. One of I have the same problem that you do with my Patreon is I feel like I have too many reward items, and it's like you become that restaurant that has such a big menu that like you can't
Yes.
figure out what you're gonna pick.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely for my next Kickstarter, I'm gonna scale way down and be more zen, and also like I realized like, oh, you don't have to put everything up right at the start. You can introduce like new levels as you go. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of like deep thinking about all this crap I have to do once it's over. But for now, I'm just kind of, trying to hawk it without being obnoxious is the hardest part.
Have you tried promoting it outside of social media and everything?
Um, Not really. I mean, I was thinking about contacting some of the free weeklies here, but I'm also like kind of, I kind of don't care. Uh, like I mean, another part of this experiment is seeing like what I can do just with the people that I have following me.
Sure.
Is like, do I have the size of an of audience that I could ostensibly do this over and over down the road. So that's what I'm trying to find out.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense because if you brought in like Willamette Week, or if you brought in like God, I forgot the name of the other one. Oh, what is it?
Oh, the Mercury.
Mercury, yeah, the Portland Mercury. If you brought either of those in, it's like it would be really hard to say what part was that audience and what part was your audience. It would get kind of noisy then.
Yeah, and I mean, it's also like a very convenient cover for me, also being kind of lazy. But yeah, I don't know. It's just like there's a certain I have an extreme level of discomfort with this with like just doing this Kickstarter because you open yourself up for public failure, which is like I'm just like not into. I mean, I don't know that there is anybody into that, but yeah, like that's been the thing that's just like been so weighing so heavily on me is just yeah, like if it fails, then what do I do? Do I just like how do I laugh this off? It's like, oh, I can't, because I've been doling out weeks of sincere like, please give us money, we really want to do this. You can't just like, I meant to do that. So yeah, I mean, like there's only like I feel like between my day job of writing comics and then the rest of the time trying to get this book done, it's just like there's only so much I can sort of expend towards it to keep myself sane and balanced and not collapsing by May 31st.
Right. Well, don't you have are you co-writing or are you writing an issue of Detective Comics?
I co-wrote an issue with James Tynan.
I feel like that's a pretty good advertisement in a way, even though it's like obviously you're not going to have a short Order Crooks ad in the back of it or something like that.
Yeah,
that would be pretty amazing. It's like, don't pay me, just put an ad in the back there, DC. But I mean, it is like a good way because it expands your audience to. I mean, Detective Comics is like the company is literally named after it, so
yeah. It was super intimidating, and it happened super fast. And yeah, like, I don't know, I'm getting better at things like that, like things that would just like cripple me with fear. Is now it's like, okay, like this sounds impossible, but I've done stupider things than this. so yeah, it was a real leveling up. I felt like really, just like so much of like watching everything come in like piece by piece, and it was we were kind of under the gun at points, and I don't know, it was like when I co-wrote on Captain Marvel, like watching how the big two operates is like so different from the rest of comics.
Yeah, I mean, I far and away know your work for your creator-owned stuff, and it's I'm curious, like how much do you feel like you have to do you have to change yourself at all, like the way you approach things when you're working on like a for hire job, or do you feel like you can still kind of be the same guy while doing it?
I try to I try to be the same person, like for Kiss Vampirella, like that, like which is never a book I ever thought I would write or would exist, really.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. It's kind of like when they did Predator versus Archie, and I was just like, how is this a thing? But I mean, not in a bad way. I mean, there's an audience for it clearly, but it's just one of those things.
Yeah, but when they asked me and they gave me like some of the parameters, I just like I was like, well, here's a story. Here's a subject. I've always been interested in, that stuff like satanic backmasking and subliminal messages on, rock records.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, how can I do that in a story and somehow bring Kiss and Vampirella together? And I figured out a way. And it's like, I don't know. And it's the same with like Injustice. Like, so much of that was already pre-written, basically. Like, Brian had done the first 12 issues, and we were following the game script. But I found the little oh, okay, I have this many pages per issue where I can kind of do whatever I want with Harley Quinn. This is the part of the story I get to make up myself. So.
Mm-hmm.
So, you find your spots. Like, there's so much of it is like, here's what I have to do. And then you just find your little windows where you can do stuff that you've always wanted to do. And hopefully, the two come together.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that I posited Detective Comics as like an advertisement for your other work. But I had Sean Makowitz on my podcast, and we talked about, demonic and everything like that, and about how he discovered your work because of High Crimes, and how like that was like that sold him. So in a weird way, it's like your creator-owned work in showing that you could do a book like that, which was Eisner nominated. Or did it win an Eisner? Was it just nominated?
No. We lost to Sex Criminals, though. That's kind of prestigious.
That is. And you also worked on Sex Criminals. Weren't you flatting at
first?
Yes. So
I flatted half an issue.
Even when you win or you lose, you win. But it is interesting. It's like by doing High Crimes, you proved, and Ibrahim proved, that you guys can do comics and you can make a damn good comic while you're doing it. And like that got you work, which is pretty great.
Yeah, it's still super bizarre to me that it actually worked out, because that was, for me, High Crimes was pretty much a Hail Mary. I had like 2 books that I had sold to a publisher but that were nowhere near coming out, and like this was it. And so I was just like, well, like if nothing else, we'll tell this story and I'll always have this. And then somehow all the right people saw it, and it's not like it was a huge, like, it came out through Monkey Brain. It was digital only. It wasn't like I don't know, like so many things could have gone wrong and I wouldn't be here talking to you right now. So it's really and that's why I'm pushing right now. Like I'm pushing pretty hard on creator-owned stuff, because I feel like that's the stuff where I don't have to pick my spots. Like it's all my spot if I want it to be. So yeah, and just I don't know. I'm trying to sort of break out and doing weird zine stuff and like assembling comics and I don't know, just trying to see wherever I kind of take myself, and hopefully I find somebody who's into that, and maybe that inspires them to want to hire me for something.
Didn't you make an enamel pin too?
Well, we're making one for the Kickstarter.
Oh, okay. For some reason, I thought you had like made one that you were going to be selling as well. I thought I saw something on Twitter. Maybe you were just sharing, because it seems like enamel pins are extremely hot right now.
Oh, they are. And yeah, like I do have plans for a couple, but I mean, I found out the reason they're hot is that, well, I mean, at least from a seller's perspective is, you at least if you're ordering 100 of them, you get them for like $3 a pop.
Right.
And they always go for $10. So that's, like you're doubling your money, and then some. So yeah, but yeah, I wish probably in 10 years, like, some website will have an oral history of like how enamel pins blew up again. Because it just came out of nowhere. And then, now everybody has enamel pins.
It is an extremely cyclical world we live in. It's like, I don't know. It's in the 90s are back in a very real way. I want to ask about the zines, but before I want to ask 2 last questions about Order Crooks. These are the super random ones. First off, how much research did you do by just going to eat food?
A fair amount. Like there's a couple of pods, which are like where the food carts are collected, are called pods, that I like. So, yeah, I could definitely like tell myself like, oh, I'm eating these Belgian fries for research. But you know, like the research part is now like I'm having to come up with recipes for every issue.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part is like trying to get something that like one you can visually depict, like that happens in the course of the story, but is so it can't be like crazy ornate, but it also like can't suck. So yeah, that's the hardest part of my research now is trying to cook stuff that perhaps like somebody who actually knows what they're doing in a kitchen would cook
and do well with it.
Yeah, the doing well with it is the hard part. Like I can do all the other stuff.
Well, I'm curious. Do you actually have kind of like a defined idea as to how, like, what Rockwell does and what Harper would do? Because like Harper actually makes money. Like, and not to spoil something that happens in the first issue, but she's like good at what she does, and she's not really meant to be there. And Rock is meant to be there, and he can't make a single dime because he keeps putting damn mangoes in his tacos. Like, do you have a perspective on kind of how like they approach food?
Yeah. I mean, definitely for Harper, and the more we get into her story, but she lives in this sort of flop house. They call it a co-op collective, but it's basically somebody owns a loft and anybody can move in and rent, you know, a floor space. So she lives there with, you know, a couple dozen people, including like small children. And so out of necessity, like just to feel productive and like that she's doing something good, she basically cooks for everybody. And the only stuff she has is like whatever they've managed to gather up the previous day. Mm-hmm. So she's kind of she calls it junk cuisine, like, cause it's like, here's all the crap that you have to work with. And now somehow cook something that will work for, you know, 30 people, like 10 of whom are vegetarian, and, you know, 15 are pescatarian and, mm-hmm. 6 are hardcore vegan, and, you know, somehow satisfy everybody. So yeah, like she's just more, and whereas Rock kind of sees cooking. I mean, the Rock is bad at the public service part. Like I feel like he's a good cook, but he's like the dude who's like the most amazing jazz player you've ever heard. But the moment he gets on stage, it's just all flat notes. So
he feels like the artist, and she feels like the person who knows what people want.
Yeah, but there's a lot of like give and take on that, and
sure.
That's there's a lot of exploring that'll happen between the two of them, and there's a lot also that I'm still like kind of figuring out. Like I don't want to, but yeah, it's sort of, I don't know. I'm doing a lot of weird stuff in this book that I've never done before, so that's another reason I have to Kickstart it. I think is just to show like, hey, look, this can be done. So now, next time, please believe me and give me money.
I very much support cooking comics. I had Joe Keating on that long ago, and we were talking about like what we'd like to see more in comics. And I specifically said I'd like to see more cooking comics, and now he's doing one, and now you're doing one, so I'm all about it. But last question about Order Crooks, not really even about it. If you opened a food truck, what would your food truck be?
I think, like, would I have to cook? Or like, do I just like own the truck and I could come by and
let's go with that one.
Okay. Then it'd probably be like one of those fancy grilled cheese sandwich trucks that also has tomato soup.
Comfort food.
And like, yeah. And we will have figured out some sort of serving tray system where I don't know. That'll be the thing that like brings everybody and keeps them away from all the other grilled cheese food trucks.
It's like a bread bowl that is a grilled cheese sandwich.
There, see, we're right on the verge of it. I have an amazing restaurant idea. I'm just going to put it on here. Anybody wants to steal it because I'm never going to do it. But it's a restaurant that serves ice cream in the summer and soup in the fall and winter.
That's a good idea.
And Joe Keating, bringing him back up, suggested that I call it Slurps.
That's a good name. I like it.
So putting I guess that would be my food cart.
See, you could do that. You could do that, but you could also have the grilled cheese bread bowl, which I actually think is a super good idea and also delicious. And I kind of want to get it now. Yeah, Yeah, I didn't. Like, Grilled Cheese Grill, I guess, has a storefront now, don't they? I don't remember.
I can't keep. Yeah, who knows?
It seems like all the big food trucks in Portland eventually get a storefront. All right, so zines. You did previously discussed. I live in a clown motel. You had your zine Pool Disaster, which tells the story of the insane building of a pool next to your mom's house. Near as I can tell, I mean, we talked at Emerald City Comic Con. It seemed like you were kind of selling out or nearly sold out of all of them at Emerald City. Have you been surprised how people have responded to those books at all?
Yeah, completely. Like both of them were. I mean, when I made the Clown Motel zine, I literally made it I stayed up all night. And I mean, I worked on it for almost like 24 hours straight, because it was on a Friday before that Emerald City. Emerald City was the next Thursday. So I had to get the order in before the printer closed on Friday. And I don't know. Yeah, it was just like I got tired of people bringing it up to me and asking about it. And I was still working on the prose book, but I just wanted something that was just like, what's something that I can make that's quick and easy and like I could sell at a con. And I could, monetize this instead of just like having to tell the same stories over and over. Because I didn't think Clown Motel was going to last. I thought it would, like, as soon as the month was over, it just like, okay, we're done. But it's persisted. So I'm just like, okay, well, if that's what people want, that's what I'm going to give them. And
lean into it.
Yeah. And people really like the zine. So then, then Pool Disaster happened last summer and I was just tweeting about it and it kind of blew up and I was on the road all day. Cause I spent the day that I finally left Omaha, I drove from Omaha to Portland in one day, which was a 23-hour drive. So I would update stuff as my mom was texting it to me, but I never saw what the response was. And then when I got back, it was like, oh shit, everybody's going crazy about it. And then I thought okay, well, I'll make a zine of this and just to see if I can. And it was like a puzzle that I figured out because I couldn't do it. There weren't enough tweets from me to make that into a book. But then when I started going through the text between me and my mom, when she was updating me, I was like, I'll just take screenshots of the text and I'll put those in the book. So then the book turns into a weird conversation between me and my mom. Mm-hmm. People I sold out of, I got 100 made and sold out, within a week.
I think the interesting thing, maybe the most interesting trend in comics in the last year or two for me is, and not to get totally economics nerd on you, is how some creators are creating secondary revenue streams for themselves. Jen Bartel makes a mint on enamel pins, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And she does a phenomenal job of it, and that can supplement or even become your primary income if you do it right. And you can write Injustice, and you can write Heartthrob, and you can write Detective Comics and do all this stuff like that. But you can also make money when you go to cons by having Pool Disaster and I Lived in a Clown Motel, especially, that's an especially good thing for you because a lot of times I always kind of get the vibe that writers don't have a lot to kind of put out there when you're at a con. So having something like that is a special attraction for people who are walking by.
Oh yeah. I mean, and I think I learned that at Heroes Con 2015 because that was the hardcover trades for High Crimes had just arrived off the boat and I'd had them freight shipped to Heroes and I was praying they would arrive and I got a box of 50 and I was like, I hope I haven't made a mistake. And I sold out of most of them in the first day.
Wow.
And then got rid of the rest on the second day. And I think that was when I realized it's you can't just show up. You need to have something that people are talking about, something that they can't get. Mm-hmm. If they're, it's got to be something that's different than just oh, well, I could sit at home and read his Twitter and I'd get the same experience. Having something that's brand new, and that you're kind of talking up. I think that's why I've leaned into the zines. Is like it's like, okay, I've done Clown Motel. I need something new now. And then Pool Disaster was like, well, that's ready made. Like I've got the archive of it. And it's just like, yeah, like each one's a puzzle. Like the third one I'm doing, I think I'm doing it. I'm going to do it in like a manga style. Like I want each book to look different. So like, you know, Clown Motel just looks like a traditional comic, and Pool Disaster is like almost like a 45 record sleeve. It's just a square thing. So I just want to like compile this library, and like if you order the complete library, it'll just come in this weird box because there's no way you can fit it into any sort of like normal box because each one will be shaped. It's almost like McSweeney's. I don't know if you ever read. Yeah, like they had like their fifth or sixth issue like came in a box and was like bound with a rubber band. And I think like definitely I'm taking inspiration from stuff like that.
You know what you should do is you should make a zine that is the Short Order Crooks cookbook and make that one of your rewards.
Oh, it is. No, that's one of our stretch goals is yeah, like I have all these comics pros who have agreed to give me recipes of theirs.
I missed that. I'm sorry. I failed as a host. I'm horrible.
That's okay. It's all the way down there. So.
All right. So last question I have for you. You recently had a signing at Fantastic Comics in Berkeley, California, which by all accounts is a fantastic shop. No pun intended. Before that, you worked in the shop for a few days, and you said that was an eye-opening experience on Twitter. I'm a big retail fan. I'm curious, what did you learn from that experience, and how do you think that experience might change your approach when it comes to your own books, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, I just got to see all the stuff that like we as creators talk about very abstractly. Like, you know, if we'll go online and say, hey, it's final order cutoff day, like, you know, be sure to like pre-order from your shop. And it's like, and final order cutoff is just sort of this to me was just like, oh, it's just this abstract day and this is when it ends. Like, but then like sitting down with my friend Juliet as she went through the final orders and like seeing like, okay, here's what makes the cut. Here's what, you know, is not getting ordered. And, you know, the logic behind why stuff gets ordered and why it doesn't. And also seeing just like which books are insanely popular at that store and which books that you think would be insanely popular that aren't. Like each, you know, I feel like Fantastic Comics is a uniquely situated shop. Like they have a very like lots of queer customer base, and you know they're right in the heart of Berkeley. Like there's just I don't know. So you know, definitely, I think their orders would not be the same as a shop, you know, somewhere else. Like everybody's kind of catering to their market. But like seeing just, you know, like the actual process of ordering books, and then on Tuesday when the diamond shipment came in and opening up all the boxes and like, here's all the stuff that's damaged, and like, here is a box, and when you open the box, it's full of like bubble wrap, and then the only thing that's in there is one like hardcover trade, and stuff like that. And of course, like my book that I was there to sign didn't show up.
Oh my God.
And then, yeah, so like damages, and then like doing the pull list, which was actually like a lot of fun. Like I would like nominate myself to like do the pull list at a local shop if they just wanted to hire me for an hour a week. And then, yeah, just, you know, the whole dance of like, you know, here's how we move out the old issues and here's where they go. And I don't know. It was just, you know, like, I feel like working in comics, it tends to get a bit abstract. Just like what goes into getting our books into readers' hands.
You're always kind of dealing with the macro and they're dealing with the micro.
Yeah. And it's, you know, I don't know. I mean, I think that's definitely like kind of boosted some of my incentive to work on some of my secondary income, just because not as like I'm not like singing a doom song now, but it's also like just seeing like, like, I don't know, it's intimidating, really.
Well, I mean, there's so much product out there, and beyond that, you're kind of at the mercy. You're at the mercy of the whims of shop by shop and customer by customer. I mean, you're exactly right in saying that Fantastic Comics is going to be way different than Challengers in Chicago, and Challengers is going to be way different than Big Bang in Dublin, and Third Eye Comics is going to be way different than all of them. I mean, and it's interesting. It's because I think that we have, like, fans and everybody else have this holistic view that it's like Batman sells a ton and Spider-Man sells a ton and yada yada yada. Some shops sell like no Spider-Man. Some shops smell. There's probably I don't know about Batman. Some shop might sell basically no Batman. I don't know. Like Isotope Comics might not sell very much Batman, but it is just kind of interesting. It's like it's a sea of different voices and ideas as to what works. My shop, basically the one I go to in Alaska, they don't order basically any volume 1 trade of Image at this point, which blows my mind. They got one copy of Seven to Eternity, which is, Remender and Openia, and that's a big book anywhere else. And it's fascinating because, like, some places still just really cater towards Marvel and DC, and that's the way it is.
Yeah, and Fantastic definitely skews the other direction. So yeah, I mean, just preconceptions that I had, and just also like what also my last day working there was when all the free comic book day books showed up, which was so many boxes, and each one was like heavier than the last. And it took, a good like 30 minutes just to move them like into the back area. Mm-hmm. I mean, and then it took, like 2 weeks after that for everyone to, pull them, sort them, stamp them, put them in bags. And it's like, and this is just like, this is on top of like everything else that they have to do. And it's just like, crazy. I don't know, but it was also like really, really positive, like just seeing how many people would kind of wander in and out. And like, I remember like the first sort of customer that I talked to was like, she hadn't read comics in like 20 years.
Wow.
But she had like just gotten divorced. And she really wanted some ElfQuest books. So it was like, oh, that's so cool. Like, yeah. And just like, I don't know. And just seeing like what people just browsing bring up to the, like Saga sells a lot, unsurprisingly. Right. But I was like, seeing like 4 separate people, and it's not like it just came out, but like 4 separate people throughout a day bring up the Saga trade, like the latest Saga trade. It's just like, man, like, I don't know. Like a lot of it is really like kind of scare inducing. Mm-hmm. 'Cause it's like, am I ever going to be at a level where like this is going to be a reality of my career, or like, am I just like, I don't know, like I'm super neurotic at my best of times. Like, I think I spent my whole therapy session today talking to my therapist about Kickstarter. So,
I was listening to a podcast today they were talking about, how writers are like, so much of it is based, like they were talking about journalists, but I mean, I think it's the same for people of all varieties who write. It's like a lot of it's based off of ego. And it's so like, when you get to the point of trying to sell these books and everything like that, it's kind of hard not to get naturally competitive or naturally like, I want to be there. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm that way. It's like, it's horrible, but a lot of times when it comes to other comic sites and stuff like that, I'm like, I'm happy that you all got nominated for an Eisner, but I wish I was nominated for an Eisner.
Yeah. I mean, I also feel like I got kind of an inoculation because I lived with Matt and Kelly Sue for a couple of years. Basically, around the time that, like, I mean, I was there when like Bitch Planet was introduced and Sex Criminals. So like, that definitely like kind of tempers your like, oh, okay. Like, I don't know, just like living amongst them as normal human beings day-to-day basis is like, oh, okay. Like, it's not like, they're like, they have some sort of like mystical hidden secret. It's just like, it's just something they work at and they get better at, and perhaps I too can get better at my craft. So yeah, I mean, I still get stuff like that kind of psych me out, like seeing it in person, like, oh, like, why isn't my book being brought up to the counter? But you know, that's everyday me. That's not even necessarily comics me.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do that. You didn't? Did you try to hand sell anybody? Did you go out there and try to be Mr. Salesman?
No, not really. I'm not great at that. I mean, I answered questions when they had questions, but you know, and I got to set up my staff pick table.
Nice.
And yeah, I sold. I know I sold at least one Ben Sears book off of it. So.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I feel like job well done.
I feel like my shop probably doesn't even know who Ben Sears is.
I'm doing a book with him right now.
What?
So.
Man, I love his stuff.
Oh yeah,
God, I need to get more of his books because like I just love his like the little zine books he does.
Yeah, that's why I'm like shocked that he actually agreed to work with me, because I was like, you don't need anyone. Like, you could just go off and make your own perfect comics for the rest of your life and be fine.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, somehow he agreed to work on this really ridiculous comedy book with me. So.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. Good luck on Short Order Crooks. And, you know, everybody, I'll have a link in the post. Go support the book. It's going to be great. I've read most of the first issue. It's awesome. So, Chris, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with writer Christopher Sebela. You can find him on Twitter at xtop, on his website at christophersebela.com, and in comics like Heartthrob, Injustice Ground Zero, and his currently being Kickstarted comic Short Order Crooks, which you can back on Kickstarter. If you're a fan of the show, there's some big news. Off Panel now has a Patreon. If you like the show and want to support it, consider backing it on Patreon at patreon.com/offpanel. There are fun rewards and insider information you can get if you do. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Dan Lee, Kat McKenzie, Lou Iovino, Christopher Carter, Nicholas Kesslake, Brian Dickerson, Greg Rucka, Ryan Mayle, Adam Highfill, Nicholas Gardner, Andrew Corrigan, Fiona Staples, Chris Morris, Johan Barander, Chris O'Halloran, Mark Abnett, Matt Battaglia, Alec Bernal, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim DiMonacos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. Don't forget to like the show on Facebook at /sketched. That's SKTCHD. Follow it on Twitter at @sketchcomic, or follow me at @slicefriedgold. Want more from Off Panel? Subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher and give the show a rating or review while you're at it. A quick thanks to the band Wolfbeck, whose excellent track Outro from their album Volmilch opens and closes the show now. Give them a listen as they're totally rad. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.